Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
Well, hello, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Thank you for coming along on the journey of this podcast that is designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. The Digital Enterprise Society is a forum for the exchange of ideas surrounding the tools, processes, practices that are used across the product lifecycle. To learn more, visit digitalenterprisesociety.org. My name is Thom Singer, and I have the honor to be the co-host for this show along with Craig Brown, who is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at GM. Hey, Craig, how are you today?
I'm great, Thom. Can you believe it?
I know.
It seems like we just started yesterday.
I actually took the word new podcast or new show out of the introduction because once you cross 10, it's really not new anymore. We're an established podcast with listeners and people who are giving us feedback. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? This is great. I am enjoying it. Look forward to today's guest.
Oh, absolutely. Today's going to be fantastic because each week we try to bring to this podcast interesting interviews and other ideas that help all the listeners enhance and grow their careers. And today is no different. Today we have Rosemary Astheimer, and she is an assistant professor of practice at Purdue Polytechnic Institute. She is a 3D CAD expert and instructor, and she has worked in industry as both a project manager and an applications engineer. Hey, Rosemary, welcome to the DES podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, I don't like to read really long bios about people, right? So why don't you give us a little bit of background about who you are? What's your story, Rosemary?
Sure. As you said, I spent about the first 15 years of my career in the CAD industry. I started using CAD software in college and I just loved it. So I started out with PTC. They made Pro Engineer at the time. It's now called Creo. And I then went to a small startup called VistaG. They do a simulation of composite materials, and that's where I learned CATIA and NX as well. And I did a lot of traveling, and when I got tired of that, I went back to PTC where I was a product manager to help shape the Creo software and better serve what the customers needed. And then about 5 years ago, Nathan Hartman came to me and he says, I think we could use your expertise. And so I've been here. I teach a certificate program for industry professionals, helping them learn about model-based definition, and then also picked up some undergraduate courses that I'm teaching the same topic in.
Rosemary, that's fabulous. I kind of have wondered recently about CAD, and has CAD reached its full potential, or is it climaxed? I'm kind of curious what you think.
I think yes and no. I think from a design perspective, right, physically designing a 3D part, that, yeah, maybe it's approaching that limit, but what we can do with a CAD model after we have that design still has a long way to go. And model-based definition is a great example of that. We can put information in the model about how to manufacture it and what materials it's made out of and how we want to inspect it. But there's still a lot of challenges to be solved around sharing that information streamlessly.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is the authoring, or maybe who has the privilege to author, maybe getting in the way. A lot of what you pointed out about model-based design or model-based definition allows us to annotate the model with more and more information, be it manufacturing information or even supply chain information. But especially in a large company, those pieces of insight don't come from the person who authored the CAD model. And so now the permission model and the file structure and a bunch of other things get in the way, or at least it seems to me they get in the way. And I'm not sure the security model for multiple authors, if I can say it that way, not necessarily the creator of the geometry, but also the adding of this other information. It seems to me to be a real challenge. Do you see a way forward in that as you talk about model-based definition?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head as to what some of the challenges are. Like you said, the person designing the part might not know best how to manufacture that part. And so they might design it such that it's going to end up being a crazy expensive part. And I try to teach my students this as well. You have to look at the whole picture, right? Just because you made a hole, say, smaller or have a tighter tolerance, doesn't mean it's better. And one of my former CEOs, Stephen Luby, when I worked at Vistagy, used to say that engineers make $1 million decisions every day, and they don't realize it. Because you think, oh, I'm going to make this hole smaller and tighter. But guess what? The manufacturing just tripled or quadrupled or whatever to be able to hold that tolerance. And when it gets put together, it's harder to assemble because it's so tight. So we really have to have a holistic view and not just work in silos, which I think has been a challenge with my generation of, oh, that's not my job. I'm not going to worry about manufacturing because I'm the designer. Right. So I think we really need to open it up and have, it needs to be a collaborative effort.
So I agree with that. And I was surprised in my years at General Motors when we talked about manufacturing practices. And in fact, a bill of process was driven not so much for the engineering process as it was for the manufacturing process. So what I mean by that is you had to know your manufacturing process maturity before you could go off and design an engine block. Now you could propose a radical change, but then you had to work with manufacturing to make sure they could actually do it at rate, at least in a mass producer. Rate matters a lot, how many jobs you can do per hour. So I think the evolution I'd like to see in the CAD world would just be this whole authoring, the ability to add more information to a design, or better yet, enforce information like a bill of process, reminding a designer, no, you can't design it that way because we can't mill it, or we can't mold it, or we can't bend it, right? Now, that's going to all change with 3D printing. And I wondered if, as you talk about model-based definition, have the discussions around additive or printing of parts come up, and what do you see as the challenges there?
Yeah, I think I know there is an ASME committee around additive manufacturing. I'm not involved in that, so I can't speak to the details, but I think additive manufacturing it's become more of a commodity, especially for the students. I think that's the first thing they think, like, oh, let's 3D print it. And again, might not always be the best solution. It is great, however, to get an idea of what you're working with. Great for rapid prototyping. And that's where we are, I'll say, at the lower end right now. There are certainly some high quality 3D printers. You can make, finished parts via that method. But yeah, I think it will evolve, and it's going to become more prevalent. Right? They're even talking about putting a 3D printer on the space station. So if you're up there and you need a part, you can make it on the spot. You don't have to carry everything with you. So it's definitely going to continue to evolve, and I look forward to see where that's going.
Yeah, and that's interesting you bring that up, because the droplet of material that's going to get molded somehow to the part has to only worry about its inertia. It doesn't have any gravity. So it's an interesting place. I mean, you could probably print shapes you can't even imagine because you don't have to worry about a gravity influencing it. So
yeah, good point.
Really interesting. So your journey back to education, what inspired you to do that, to go back and be a professor of practice?
I've always loved sharing my knowledge, trying to help others out. And I think I'm pretty good at explaining things, breaking things down from a different perspective. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I didn't know if it was going to work, especially since I'm not at Purdue. I actually live in Massachusetts. So I have the other challenge of teaching from a distance. And everyone always asks me, well, how do you do that? Well, we have this thing called the internet. And it's definitely been a challenge, but it's been really fun. And you have to keep changing your content all the time, right? I go to industry conferences like Realize Live, to the community of experts, to try to keep up on the technology. And also that translates into a little bit of a different teaching paradigm that we're trying to do at Purdue called the flipped classroom, where instead of the students coming to a room and listening to the professor talk once, and hopefully they stay awake and get all that information, right? If it's 8 o'clock in the morning, chances are pretty low on that happening. But with me, I'll record my materials and post it as a video, and they can watch it as many times as they want. If they need to watch it more than once, they have the opportunity when they're ready to learn, not when I'm ready to be in the classroom with them. And then we have web meetings to discuss any details or questions they might have. So we're trying to approach a better way for them to learn, because they do learn differently, because they've been around all this technology their whole lives.
Are they all in West Lafayette, or are they also remotely located around the world?
They are all on campus. So I do get the opportunity to meet them. I'll go the first week of class to show them that I'm a real person, and usually at the end of the semester to finish up a project, but they are all on campus. Yeah,
I'm enough of a technologist to want to take advantage of the internet and what we're doing right now. The three of us were in 3 different locations in the country, right? And I think that's part of the brave new world. And I think your point's a really good one about people learning on their schedule. It actually might be the next flip in productivity, is just realizing that that's the way people learn. And then, some people always argue you have to be face-to-face. Well, we're kind of face-to-face now. But, people do communicate in ways other than just their verbal cues. Do you see that being any part of a challenge, or do you guys always have video with your classwork where you can see the feedback of the student?
That is definitely a challenge, right? Again, I think they're used to typing, whether it be texting or emailing. So I think it's great experience for them to get exposure to web meetings, because they're going to do them all the time in industry. However, getting them to show their face is a challenge. They're a little bit shy. And then getting them to speak up is a challenge.
Maybe they haven't cleaned their room, but I mean,
yeah, or
whatever.
I got a lot of, I don't have a microphone on my computer. And okay, well, we have a 16-week-long semester. Why at week 15 is this still a problem? So
yeah, they're not that expensive. That's right.
It is challenging. So I have they get credit when they speak up. That's part of their final grade, part of their participation in the meetings.
Well, that's really good, because that's actually required to be successful in business. You can't just be the quiet one in the back of the room voting. You got to also participate, right?
Exactly.
What's this next generation like? What are they craving? You've got all undergraduates, is that right? Or maybe some graduate students as well?
Right now, all undergrads.
Okay. What are they craving? What is it that they think they want to do, or what do they need from us?
I think they really want to do meaningful work. They want to do something that will that they're passionate about. And I'm trying to do this more in my projects with them. For example, I did a couple semesters ago, I found an animal, a dog that was born with a limb deformity, and I made their project to design something to help this dog walk better.
Oh, cool.
And they loved it. I had students the next semester saying, whatever happened with that dog? And, coming back and asking me about it. So I think, they're tech savvy, but they want to put that to good use so that they can do something that they're very passionate about. And I think they do need a little bit of mentoring, as you spoke of, earlier. I try not to just teach them the technical stuff, but how to write a professional email. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you how much I love it when I get an email that says, "Hey, professor, can you help me with this?" Mm-hmm. And so I try to teach them, like, no, you can't. That doesn't fly. Try to, I always incorporate writing or some sort of presentation or video to get the soft skills up there as well, because especially teaching a technical subject, that's their strength, right? So they need to work on the other stuff to make them a well-rounded individual. So they are very open to that, I think, and appreciate that I try to give them a little bit of guidance in that area.
You bring up a really interesting point for both the students and also young professionals around this whole idea of mentors. And we're actually working on doing an entire podcast episode on mentorship and how important it is. But how do people go about, and obviously they have a professor like you that they can turn to if they're a student, but if this is somebody who might already be in their career, maybe they're 25, 30 years old, they're still growing forward. How do you recommend people go about finding mentorship? Because I think this is really important that we've touched on this.
Yeah, that is a good point. I know for me, LinkedIn has worked, but hopefully this Digital Enterprise Society can actually become a place that they can go. I'm on the Education and Training Committee. I'm the chair to try to help bring content to these podcasts, webinars, what have you. And that's actually one of our goals, is to have a place on that page where maybe we can connect you with someone that would be in the industry that you're interested in. So I'm not sure that there is anything out there right now that's great, other than just going to conferences and talking to people like Thom told me I should. But, hopefully we can help out with that through the Digital Enterprise Society.
Yeah, the Digital Enterprise Society is definitely working to be that conduit to help people find that mentorship and be able to connect. But my advice always to people, like you said, and we met at a conference where I was the Master of Ceremonies and where I was speaking, and that's part of my message, right? It's you've got to take the action to go and talk to people. But what I always remind young professionals is people want, people like myself and Craig and, who are getting a little bit more maybe silver gray in the hair. We like to help. So if you turn to somebody and say, hey, you've done really well in your career, what advice do you have for me? They oftentimes will talk your ear off. And I'm always surprised how many people will come back to me and go, oh my gosh, I asked people for help. Now I have 3 mentors.
Thom, at the conference that I think Rosemary's referring to, where you made that point with folks, a couple younger folks at GM, completely different part of where I was at that time, literally walked up and said, well, I work in a lab and you used to work up here and I'd like to know about this. And I was surprised. And so we've gotten to know each other pretty well. And as I retired, this gentleman said, well, what am I going to do? I still want you as a mentor. I said, well, chances are I'm going to answer the phone. So especially from you. And why am I motivated? Well, frankly, it's because he's interested. He does want to know something about how I did it, and what steps do you have to make inside of a company the size of General Motors to leave your mark, to contribute, and also to lead. And so this gentleman, he's a smart kid. He'll do just fine. But I was surprised at the willingness. Sometimes you want to be a mentor and you're like, well, I'm waiting for somebody to call. And they don't know how to connect, whether Rosemary, you mentioned LinkedIn. Well, I was pathetic at keeping my LinkedIn profile up to date until recently. Anyways, I think both sides, you youngsters listening, just reach out. If somebody impresses you with their writing or their discussion or their podcast, feel free to reach out to them. I'm pretty sure, especially those of us that have entered partial retirement, I'm pretty sure we'll help you understand. And the world's changing. Some of the things we know are not the same as they are in the near future. They're changing, and that's part of why I think the Digital Enterprise Society will help, is just make you aware of those trends. This 3D printing thing is real, and prototype parts for sure, almost finished parts, maybe a little bit of finishing work is required, but mass production is just around the corner. Everybody has a laser printer of some sort on their desk, right? If you can commoditize that, you can commoditize manufacturing. So it'll happen. It'll probably happen faster than people expect. Rosemary, as an experienced professional, you have any other advice for us to how we can engage these students in this next generation?
I guess one other thing that helps get these newer generation excited about technical topics and whatnot is do things like, if you have a career day where you have the opportunity to speak, where you can get out there and talk about it, I think that's great. Or bring your kid to work day. The other thing, I'm involved with the first for inspiration and recognition of science and technology. It starts at the kindergarten level, goes all the way to high school, and I'm a mentor of a team, and they have challenges that these kids get together and solve. They collaborate, they problem solve. I happen to have 4 7-year-old boys that I try to bring together. It's a little bit challenging in itself, but I think, if we can get out there as well and make sure we approach them, it goes both ways in helping make all this collaboration that's going to be necessary successessful.
All right, that's excellent. Any last words you want to make to the audience about what we're trying to do in the Digital Enterprise Society? I'm quite pleased that you've taken on the leadership of one of the committees. And I wondered if you had any other maybe challenges for the rest of us.
Well, certainly if anyone out there listening has any suggestions as to what they would like to see or hear, they can contact me. We're trying to figure out what people want to hear. And so we have a small group of volunteers trying to figure that out. But the more feedback we get, obviously, the better we'll be able to tailor what we bring to you and make it a good, usable resource for everyone.
Excellent. It's been a joy chatting with you, Rosemary. And Thom, I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you. And hey, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. Join us next week for more thoughts, ideas, and information in and around product lifecycle management. The Digital Enterprise Society is the place for the exchange of ideas around the digital manufacturing tools. Learn more at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Hey, Craig, any last words?
No. Actually, it's a great day in Michigan, and I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And we'll look forward to the next broadcast.
All right, we'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more